Okay, so we're going to look at housing in London. Obviously, with the quadrupling of population, there's crowding in London, there's high cost, and this leads to tenements because more and more people are wanting a place to live. People fight over places to live. They can afford to charge more, and people will end up paying it, even if it means two families moving into one area. So this was problematic, and this is the London now that Charles Dickens ends up coming to and seeing and experiencing and starts to write about. To give you an idea, this was an older photograph we have of some of the rundown homes that people would live in. Again, often in these one-room tenements, you would have if one family lived there, again, it's the whole family, or you would have two families or three families living in this small shared space. Kids who are either orphaned or escaping from abusive homes would just end up living on the streets. And so they would band together in gangs, the precursor of gangs, in order to survive. So that would help for shelter, for companionship, for protection. These little, often referred to as urchins, would then go out and do small muggings or steal from food, etc. And so this was the rise of the gangs that we see in Charles Dickens. In several of his novels, he has an organized group of gangs, especially Oliver Twist. So what do we know about Charles Dickens? This is the actual Charles Dickens. This is his screen form in The Quiet and Undead. And this is what he started to notice. This is what I was talking about, one of the tenements. I should have put this picture earlier, but oh well. This is a one room that they live in. And this is a family of, 2, 4, 6, 7 people. 5 kids, husband and wife, a small kettle to cook in or cook on, and everything else they would then have to eat outdoors. Use the bathroom. They would have chamber pots because there's no indoor plumbing. So they would just use the bathroom in front of one another, and then every day you throw out the muck out the window into the street. So no indoor plumbing, no sewers. So it was a pretty disgusting place to live, most likely. And jumping back to Charles Dickens, sorry, I showed you the two pictures. We know that he worked as a child in a factory. He would work 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and earn $2 a week for it. Most of the time through his childhood, he lived in prison because his father owed lots and lots of debts and couldn't repay them, and at that time they still had debtor's prison. So his whole family was thrown into jail with their father, and that's where they lived. And everyone in the family had to go out and work. There was no such thing in this point of history as childhood. If you were able to go out and work, you did. And because of what he noticed around him, the deplorable living conditions, the squalidness, the crowding, the troubles that came up from this massive social distinction between the very wealthy and the very poor, it's magnified because all of them are living alongside each other. And he started writing about it. And he wrote about it in a real way that has become known as literary realism, because that's what he did. He depicted the lives of people somewhat realistically, meaning there's a few things we can say that he goes a little bit overboard in describing, but generally we have a pretty good view of what London life was like for the poor in the 1800s. He gave us a lot of detail about the different people so that we know what they were like, what they did. He definitely would show certain characters as more sympathetic than others. He definitely was sympathetic to the lower classes and the poor, and almost all of his bad guys are the wealthy for one reason or another. And continuing on, It's because of what he encountered on a daily basis that he created this. And so we know what London was like. It was a world city, awed visitors just because of its size, but also because of its squalor, how beautiful at times it could be, but also how filthy. Victorian London was the largest city in the world, and it's still one of the most populated cities in the world. Notice in 1800 the population was around a million. By 1880, 4.5 million. Massive amounts of growth that the city just wasn't really prepared to handle in this time frame. So how do you get by then? They would go to work. And so again, just the overcrowding, some early photographs of people walking on the street. And you'll notice also that the streets, there's a kind of a canal in the middle of it, and all streets were built higher up on the sides, and they slope downwards to the middle. And that's because every day early in the morning, people would get up and throw their chamber pots contents out into the street. And then they would shout, "Garde l'eau," for watch out for the water, literally. And then that turned into what the garde l'eau turned into loo, and that's why the British people use the word loo for the bathroom. And that's why all the people would crowd up here. You think, oh, there's a huge space in the middle. No one wants to walk in what's running down the middle of the street. And even the horse and buggies stay along the sides for the most part. You see massive amounts of crowding. Again, most houses burn coal, so always full of soot. Besides what's coming out of the factories, every house and tenement is burning coal, so lots of black dust just hanging over the city. People had massive respiratory problems, and that's why the average age in the city at this time was about 60, just because of the massive amounts of coal dust that you're breathing in throughout your life. And I put a quote here from you, Peter Ackroyd, who did a biography of Dickens, and he just talks about how horrible it was that any of us, if we were to be really, truly transported back to Victorian England during Charles Dickens' time, either in The Quiet and Undead is in Wales, but if we would have gone to visit Charles Dickens in his time frame, we couldn't handle it. Again, another view of the city, just crowded people running around. Again, this is an important thought simply because I just want to bring it to your attention, because I don't often think about it, even teaching this stuff, that when you talk about Victorian London or any city at this time frame, you have hundreds of thousands of horses roaming the streets daily, all hours of the day and night. So you can just imagine what the city would have smelled like. And again, reminding you of this picture, which just shows, I mean, this is just a screenshot of one moment of the day. And just imagine this happening, 12, 14 hours a day for the most part. It's a massive amount of manure. Okay, so then we're going to be moving on to factories.